The meeting comes to order. Do you have a roll call, Peter?
Yes, I'll start with Mr. Weeks,
Present.
Mr. Restrepo,
Here.
Mr. Pepper,
Here.
Ms. Pitcher,
Here. Hello.
Chair Angelini.
Yeah, I'm here. All right, the first order of business is the approval of the minutes. Before we approve them, I just noticed in reading them that the minutes reflect various actions, motions made and motions seconded, but they do not reflect that they were voted. So that should happen just in terms of
Oh, yes, yeah. The
future.
final roll call vote, yeah.
Yeah.
The final roll call vote should be reflected in the minutes. So subject to that revision, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the prior meeting?
Motion to approve with said revisions.
Second.
There's motion made and seconded. In the absence of discussion, let's have a roll call vote.
Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Mr. Restrepo. I saw your mouth move, but you were on mute. I think that was an affirmative.
Sorry, Peter. Yes.
Oh, good. Mr. Pepper,
Yes.
Ms. Pitcher,
Yes.
and Chair Angelini.
Yes. Okay. So now we move to new business and old business, and the principal subject of this meeting is going to be the request for proposals for the rental of the hall. Peter and I have had a brief discussion about this, and he's gonna take us through the document. We authorized the issuance of the RFP at the last meeting. So we don't need a further vote, but we want to have a full discussion of the contents of this and to get your ideas and comments about anything and everything in this. Let me just restate what we talked about last time, that this is really an important opportunity for us. It's a one-time opportunity for increasing the use of this wonderful hall. And we need to create some excitement about this. We need to create interest about this. We need to bring more people into this process. Time is short. The existing lease expires in June. We will likely not have this issued until, sometime at the end of this month. So we don't have a lot of time here, and I'd like to have your input about how we can best use that time, create a sense of excitement and energy. We spoke last time about a potential listening session, and Peter and I have talked about that, and he'll lead a discussion further about that. But as he and I spoke about it before this meeting, the purpose of that session would be not only to listen to ideas which might impact the decision we make on the responses to the RFP, but also to build some attention to this, to get as many people interested as we can in submitting a bid and thinking about ways to exploit the hall in a positive way. So with that, Peter's going to take us through this document, and we're looking for ideas, comments, reactions. As I said, it's a one-time opportunity, and we need to make the most of it. With that, Peter, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think it might make sense. I was trying to figure out sequencing. Do we talk about the potential and listening session first or after? I don't know if there's a preference. I don't have a preference either way. But it's kind of like once we get into the document, it'll be obviously less about the listening session and more about the details in the document.
Well, let's talk about it now.
Yeah. So we were after the last meeting, we're certainly open to doing this, appreciate the board's recommendation on it. But as we started and knowing that we have a short amount of time, we started thinking about it with our team here. Who's the audience? Where do we do this? What are we hoping to accomplish to kind of set it up for success? And then we kind of realized maybe a further discussion about that would be helpful, because we were starting to think about, is this, a listening session like for kind of prospective bidders to maybe get their feedback about, certain ways of structuring this or terms and conditions that could be helpful or not helpful? Or is this more of like an audience of the community to make sure that they're aware, and if they have any ideas or past observations about the previous operations of it, to get that input from the community? I think in talking with the chair, it's more the latter, about the community and also generating that excitement as was described. And I think that there could be some value in that. Just know that we have a lot of experience with various public meetings, and the controversial ones get attendance, and the ones that aren't controversial, sometimes you have a public meeting and nobody shows up. So we're trying to make sure that we think about who the audience is, also getting the word out about the listening session to generate some attendance, so that it's not just us talking to ourselves. So I guess that's my brief introduction, and would be interested in hearing kind of further from the board, kind of who they think could be a good audience, and what we would also hope to accomplish from that. And we could try to, if we want to move forward, we could try to mobilize that in February at some point. I think generally in my experience with public meetings too, you really want to give a solid 2, if not 3 or 4 week lead time. So I think we'd be looking at like mid to late February if we were to turn something around pretty quickly on hosting that.
So, open for discussion.
Peter, are there any restrictions on when we can do it based on the current lease?
Well, so we wouldn't, if we did want to do, and we will do one of these with the RFP when it's advertised, is a walkthrough of the space.
Yep.
We'll have to coordinate that for sure with Luciano's. The listening session wouldn't impact that at all, because I think we were thinking of a community space. If we did it at the building, we wouldn't do it in their space. We would probably, I was thinking about reaching out to the Cannabis Control Commission, because they have a conference room on the 2nd floor. So that would be a likely candidate for a space within the building if we wanted to do it at the building. Alternatively, we could do the public library or another, space centrally located in the city if it wasn't at the building. So I think just talking about the location for it definitely makes sense to chat through further. And then to your point, I was just thinking too on the timing. The chair and I were also thinking that it's probably best to have that listening session prior to advertising the RFP. If we did it, while the RFP was kind of ongoing, if there was something that we needed to adjust, you could always do an addendum, but I just think
Right.
that that's a little more wonky to do it that way. So I think ideally we would have the listening session before advertising it. So if there's input or feedback that could affect anything in this document that we'll go through later, that we are able to do that before advertising.
Yeah, that, I mean, the longer we wait, the less time's an enemy, not an ally here, right? So, and the RFP as drafted allows it to be amended. And we could certainly draft it in such a way that almost anything from chariot races to study halls could be included. So I'm not sure we need to wait, but we can talk about it.
Yeah, we could do, if there's something that came out of a listening session, we could certainly, do an addendum if it had any material effect on the RFP, if we wanted to not lose any time in that sense.
I was hoping this is something we could advertise. I mean, to the point of putting an ad in the paper and in the Guardian, and inviting city councilors, inviting neighborhood representatives, make it an inclusive opportunity.
And just to be clear, you're talking about getting the word out about the listening session, not necessarily the advertising that we'll do.
I agree, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I feel pretty strongly that we should do it at Union Station, but I know that it might be a little bit trickier to find the space, but I just think getting people like in that space and really thinking about it and kind of immersed in it while we're having these important conversations is really important.
I agree with you if it's feasible, right? But
Yeah,
we're
right.
limited
Right.
to space, which holds about 60 people. So, because of the terms of the existing lease, but I agree with you, Sherry, if we can.
If I may chime in,
You may.
I think the possibility and to include the community, I think it would be a good move. I agree that we should probably do it prior to the RFP going out, just so that there's no odd feelings from the community. So I think they may also have some good feedback and some input relative to what our thoughts are in terms of making this a big splash and a big to-do.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chair, I also agree that we should definitely have this listening session prior to releasing the RFP. It doesn't, and I know that timing or time is not our best ally, but perhaps we do it a week prior to releasing the RFP, and we use that as a two-pronged kind of approach. On the one hand, yes, we're doing the listening session, and on the other hand, we're advertising that we're about to release the RFP. Perhaps we contact the press to be part of this listening session. Also, I'm thinking we should definitely invite the entire business community, the business organizations, the business associations, definitely the Chamber of Commerce. I'm also thinking inviting the commercial brokers, although I don't know how the legal structure would be in terms of them getting a commission. Because they obviously operate on commissions. If we're doing an RFP, the city will work directly, or the WRA would work directly with any bidder. I don't know how that connection could be made, but I know that brokers, this is what they do. They connect people that are looking for these type of spaces with the spaces themselves, with the property owners. So I don't know how the logistics will work out, but I know that the city has built excellent relationships with a lot of brokers, and I'm sure that they can help out in some way, shape, or form to bring those two people together. I think it's essential to do that.
Yeah, no, good point. Keep in mind that a commission can be paid by the tenant as well as by the landlord. I don't think we'd be.
Right.
Yeah. So we could,
Okay.
I don't think we have to worry. I don't think we should be in the business of paying a broker's commission on this. It's, I think, inconsistent with what we're trying to do, but I agree with you. I think inviting the brokers would be a good thing, and a broker could help facilitate, a winning bidder. So good.
And I agree. And I
Okay.
doubt that the RFP would allow for a commission to be paid, because it would completely destroy the purpose of the RFP to begin with. So yeah, but at least perhaps consider inviting them.
Nick,
And
any
if I
thoughts?
may,
Go ahead, Walter, please.
yeah, if I may, I think Jackson, you raised a good point, that being getting the chamber involved, because I know I had a conversation with someone at the chamber relative to attracting various companies into the Worcester area. And they said, oh, that's something that they will do, something that they'd like to do, and that's part of their mission. So
Right.
I guess having them at the table will be a plus.
Good. And getting the cultural community involved in this, I think, is also important.
Yeah.
Guys, perhaps the commercial kitchen downstairs, maybe there's some kind of a connection with this listening session. I mean, there are restaurant owners in there. Most certainly it's an incubator. They're not at a capacity to rent this major space, but at least they will be out of capacity one day. So perhaps there's a connection here between the commercial kitchen downstairs and this listening session that we're going to be doing.
Good point. Good point. Nick, anything to add?
Yeah, the other question I would ask is, should we come prepared with a plan that perhaps we were considering in the event, let's say they have a question, well, what does the city or what does WRA think? So my thoughts is, should we be prepared to lay something out if we're in that position to do that?
I would advise against doing that. But I do think that we would begin the session by talking about the opportunity, right? And explaining what's gone on and what various options could be. But look, I don't know. Your idea may be a good one, Walter. I was just reacting to it. I wasn't shooting it down.
No, it's good. This is all good. We're just having conversation.
Right. I think about, I don't know. We need to, the word imaginative needs to be in here somewhere, right? We need to not be constrained by what we've done in the past and be imaginative about future opportunities. And I I'm self-aware enough to know that I'm not a very imaginative person, so.
I'm not sure I'm agreeing with that one.
Oh, well.
Quick
Anyway.
question, Peter. Has your team come up with any thoughts, any conceptual thoughts? I know at our last discussion, I mentioned that when a group of us was in DC and how they converted their hall into different vendors, et cetera. So I was just curious if there's any thoughts on that in terms of what the staff, what team has come up with.
Yeah, so we'll walk through the RFP itself, and I just my comment on the previous thing that I was just thinking of in terms of the like presentation, if there's any kind of presentation or introduction from staff and the board at the listening session would be, we wouldn't get into the granularity that we're going to today, right, in terms of the document and the draft RFP, but it would be like, we would probably have a layout depiction of the space itself, and that hopefully there'll be an opportunity to obviously walk around the building. We could see if Luciano's is open to people looking in the space. We will, as part of the RFP, have a walkthrough, but it might be a little early to impose that on them for the listening session, but making sure that people know the characteristics of the space and all of that. So a brief introduction about that, but then keeping it pretty open-ended so that we can be imaginative, as the chair said. But we did look at, it's hard, we looked at different stations, to your point. It came up last meeting around the country, really, and some of these metro areas are very different than Worcester, obviously, in terms of population and whatnot. I think we're blessed to have the type of facility that we have here as a second city in Worcester, because some of the comparisons that we found were more of these major metro areas like Chicago's Union Station, the Main Street Station in Richmond, Virginia, Grand Central, obviously a different scale, in New York City, Union Station in Denver, Colorado, and the Union Station in Kansas City, Missouri. Those are ones that in particular seem to have the same kind of format of like a grand hall that is used for event related functions and bookings and all of that. There was a wide range in terms of pricing for that, and that was more less about the operator. We don't have visibility under the tent necessarily, unless we were to reach out and do a lot of homework and try to get some transparency from the owners of the station in terms of their like leases with operators or those agreements with operators. It was more of the outwardly facing pricing. If you're going to book an event, if you're going to book a wedding, what's the cost to have the venue for that wedding? Some have vendor exclusivity, others don't have vendor exclusivity, where you bring in, catering and all of that. Some are, I don't know if anybody on my team found more of this, but we did see that some were operated by a separate private firm. In one case, it was a commercial real estate firm. I'm not sure. I'm guessing at least one of these is maybe operated by like the municipality or division of the municipality. But it seemed like there was a lot of private sector collaboration for sure for the success of getting events booked and all of that. So it was kind of like, no groundbreaking insights, I guess I would say, and tough to like really look at apples to apples when you look at some of these metro areas and the volume of foot traffic. It's at a whole nother level than the volume of foot traffic that we have at Union Station. Not to say that these aren't venues or operators that are doing day-to-day operations and relying on the foot traffic, right? These are events that like, I want to do a wedding in Worcester. I want, beautiful premier space at Union Station for somebody that's going to have their wedding there. The foot traffic at the station doesn't necessarily matter, but just in terms of the exposure of the facility, the eyes and ears about like the opportunity and that this is available, it's a different scale in that regard, I guess I would say, because the market, right? They just have like bigger markets in terms of potential candidates for booking events and all of that. But yeah, I mean, it was I think fairly useful exercise, but I don't know that we learned a whole lot that was unsurprising to us.
Okay, thank you.
And there are people in the business of wedding event planners. Wedding event planners is an industry, right? It's
Yep.
and other event planners, I suppose.
I did reach out to Discover, sorry to interrupt, but I did reach out to Discover Central Mass. I had said that I would be doing that and ask them about if they already know folks that like could be potential bidders that we should be aware of, that we could do direct outreach to. And I was thinking along those lines, right? Like people that are already planning weddings or producing events, and their feedback was that, you know, in their experience and observations, a lot of the like event production companies are more of a vendor to the event, where they're coming in and doing AV or doing lighting versus like venue operators. But they said that they would be happy to help us in advertising this opportunity, sharing it with their networks. And I think they believe that at least making sure that those types of production companies or planners are aware of it, they could share it with people that they might know that actually do that level of venue management. So I think that that could be helpful in just making sure that we're casting a wide net and making sure that like the related vendors in this industry are aware of it too, even if that particular person that receives or sees the advertisement isn't a company that, you know, takes on that level of venue management. They're in the whole network of, you know, those service providers and vendors that could help us with the overall awareness for it.
All right, so just to summarize what I've heard, we're committed to doing this listening session. It's to listen and also to engage and to develop interest in this opportunity. We're going to do it before we issue the RFP. I think that's the consensus. We're going to be as inclusive as we can in terms of inviting people from various aspects of the community. We're going to advertise it, and we're going to try to hold it at Union Station.
Yep.
Am I missing something? I'm not just trying to summarize what I've heard. Is that a fair
And we're just gonna do
consensus?
one, right? One listening session?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My other thought is too, and I didn't read every single word of the RFP, but do we have anything about the parking?
Yeah, so we
I thought
don't.
there is. Yeah, there is a reference.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
okay.
But we can does it maybe make sense now if everybody's in agreement with the summary, unless there's further comment, we could start to get into some of the meat of the draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, so before we just get into the draft, let's, I'm just interested in follow-up, and our next session is in, for a month. Sherry, would you be willing to work with Peter and his staff in terms of the mechanics of this listening session?
Yes, definitely.
Okay,
Happy to.
good. And keep the
Yep.
rest of us informed if you
Yeah.
would do that, if that's okay with the
Absolutely.
rest. And I'm
Yep.
not trying to exclude anybody.
Just
if
easier,
you-
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, if you want to be
Yep.
involved with it, why don't you feel free to contact Sherry, and she and I will be in contact as well. Does that
Great.
work for everybody?
Sure.
Good. All right,
Yes.
great. So with that, let's go to this RFP. It's a document which is not final. So if there's anything in here that spurs a comment, be sure to make it. I had my only concern from reading it was to make it clear that we are wide open, that there's no constraint, that we're interested in maximum exploitation of the hall and of the building, and any idea and response is welcome, any use is welcome to be considered, and that we reserve, as I think this does, the city's right to, in its own discretion, accept any response, any bid that's made. With that, Peter, why don't you take us through it?
And I'll likely pause in areas that I feel like, will spark some discussion and input, but definitely feel free to just interrupt me too, if you catch something that you want to mention. So, and I will say too, to the kind of chair's point, we do request for proposals, pretty frequently. Sometimes it's for the sale of land, sometimes it's for the lease of a property. That's kind of what our office does, probably more so, but there's also, requests for proposals for different types of, vendor services and things like that. So some of this is like standard form city stuff that we can tailor as needed for the WRA, because obviously the WRA has some additional flexibilities beyond the city. This is not technically a Chapter 30B procurement under Mass General laws, so that gives us a little bit of flexibility, but some of those terms and conditions and the procedures and how we approach that kind of consistently with 30B will serve us well in terms of just like making sure that the process has that kind of level of integrity. But it does just want to mention that we do have some flexibility as the redevelopment authority where it's not subject to 30B. So there's an introduction about the dates of the issuance of the RFP, description of the space, obviously being very clear about what is the space being advertised. These are just tentative dates in terms of tours. We'll probably kick these dates out in terms of when it's going to be released because we won't release it in January. We'll release it either late February, early March to accommodate the listening session. And then while it's advertised, so there's a period of time, we usually do about a month or two. I gotta check to see what our draft due date is on this. It's in the later section, but while it's out there advertised for that, 4 to 6 week period of time, that's when we do the tours. It's like an official tour. The RFP is out, and we give opportunities for those prospective bidders that have seen the advertisement to walk through the space that's being offered. There's some definitions, some standard terms and conditions. What I really want to get into is the procedures and the evaluation criteria. So ultimately, when we go through this, we'll hopefully get many proposals, and then this evaluation criteria section kind of guides how we'll start to review those and ultimately make a selection of those. What we call the selected proposal would be referred to as the preferred lessee of the space. So you'll see that language appear in the document. Every RFP has a minimum evaluation criteria and then a comparative evaluation criteria. So everybody has to meet these basic minimum standards. And then if they proceed from there, then we get into some of the more qualitative aspects of evaluating the proposals to select the most advantageous to the WRA. So on a minimum basis, a lot of the content that we need, like basic information, the proposal itself needs to provide a very clear statement that they are interested in leasing and operating the space at the property, include a commitment that they have read and reviewed and are going to comply with the terms and conditions that the WRA has put out, and also a commitment that the bidder is going to act in good faith to quickly negotiate and execute the access agreement. So one of the things we kind of will do a two-step process. If you remember what we do with kind of land sales, it often comes with thinking about the Washington Square space with the hotel. We did like a terms of conveyance, like a purchase and sale agreement before getting to the closing and the deed, the sale of the land. And in this case, because any selected bidder would likely need to do some additional investigations, there's only so much that you can really get a handle on when you do a visual walkthrough. We would start with an access agreement that would be executed promptly, and that gives them the ability to get into the space on a more frequent basis, do architectural measurements, start to figure out what the renovations will need to be, because it's very unlikely that somebody, and I think wouldn't be advantageous to us in terms of the quality of the proposer if they were just going to walk in and operate the space as it exists today. So they'll have to prepare their plans for what they would be doing for renovations to the restaurant, not so much the Grand Hall, more the restaurant that goes with it. And then following that access agreement, that's where we would execute the lease itself. So we obviously need to, in terms of basic level of content under this minimum criteria, is who is the lessee? Like, what is the name? Is it a corporation? Is it an LLC? Have they already registered that? Are they authorized to do business in the Commonwealth, or are they out of state and planning to do that registration? Or are they already registered and authorized to do business in the Commonwealth? What is their experience and qualifications in running similar types of venues or managing events in that sense? And it's one of the things that we like to at least have them state. It doesn't really sway if they have no experience working with the public sector. It doesn't mean that they can't move forward, but we just like to understand from their past experience and who they are if they have done a lease or operated a public space before, because it's just good to know if they have that experience. The description of their use. So this is the kind of the meat of their proposal in terms of their vision, kind of aligning with our vision that we've set out in the RFP and what we hope to accomplish with the Grand Hall. What are the proposed events, functions, conferences, activities in the Grand Hall, as well as how does that relate to the use of the restaurant? and commissary space, as well as the outdoor patio that is attached to it. So I think this is where we would start to get some visibility into, do they view the Grand Hall as sort of accessory and secondary to the restaurant? Like, is this a restaurant company, a restaurant restaurateur that's kind of submitting this proposal, or are they, you know, more event management type of group that sees the restaurant as accessory to the Grand Hall to provide obviously the necessary food service to the Grand Hall? So kind of how are they viewing the two spaces and how they complement each other, and what is kind of primary or secondary? Days and hours of operation, in particular with the restaurant, I think, you know, so is this going to be a full service restaurant the way the Luciano's operates right now? They have full service restaurant, including lunch and dinner and some brunches, I believe, as well. So are they proposing to have that level of activity in the restaurant space in between those events that happen at the Grand Hall? Or are they really focused on the Grand Hall and just using that for kind of special events as well? Obviously, you could have smaller events taking place in the restaurant space. I think Luciano's does a good amount of mercy meals within the restaurant, so they don't need to be in the Grand Hall itself, but it's still a special event. So is it kind of for those types of bookings, or is it also going to be a full service restaurant that's open, you know, 6 or 7 days a week? That would be important to know. What their projected improvements are, you know, and at this level, you know, probably be pretty basic in terms of the scope and their consideration on the level of renovation, because they would just have the opportunity to have that visual walk through the space, and that would probably be, you know, further refined and built upon as they get into the access agreement. But what do they envision in terms of renovations within the restaurant, and what would be their projected number of annual events in the Grand Hall? We'll speak later in the evaluation criteria, because that is a focus of ours, of, like, you know, the volume of events, the frequency of events that we hope to see happen. And then the term. So we haven't specified, is this, you know, a 10-year lease with 2 10-year options? Is this a, you know, 5-year lease with 4 5-year options? So we would be looking for them to tell us what the desired term is. Usually what we see, especially if there's a significant investment happening, we see a lot of tenants want to have at least a base term of 10 years to make sure that they kind of protect that level of investment. If it's, you know, $500,000 or $1 million, they want to make sure that they're not going to be exposed to getting, you know, terminated or expiring within 5 years. So I would expect to see a lot of folks doing like a 10-year proposal with maybe some options, but we would, you know, look to see that in their proposal. And then some financials around both the startup costs in terms of renovations, getting set up, getting launched, and then a pro forma in terms of the operation, so that we can start to evaluate, do a little bit of underwriting in terms of if this proposal looks to be viable. And then the last piece that is a requirement for sure, and there's a separate form that you'll see later in the document, is obviously everybody needs to submit their price proposal. So we talked last meeting and it seemed like we had consensus on the current lease rate is about $11,000 a month. So that's what we've said as a minimum offer, but that could range. Some people could be submitting the minimum, they could be offering more. As we get into the comparative evaluation, this is where we start to be more kind of qualitative, and now we've got all the content, all the information that we need to make a sound decision. And then this kind of speaks to, like, how would we start to evaluate that? So
Let me
yeah,
interrupt you for a second here.
pause here,
Yeah, I was a bit concerned about this, because what we don't want to do is end up in a dispute with a prospective bidder as to whether we properly utilized the terms of this bid request. So I think it's important as we go through this, and the law department has to be involved, is to emphasize that these aren't controlling, right? That it could, I mean, we want to reserve the possibility that someone who fits the highly advantageous category in 1, 2, and 3 could still not be accepted as the bidder.
Right.
And 4. So these
Right.
are, as I see it, these are factors for us to consider, but not factors upon which the determination will certainly be made.
That's right. Yeah. And so and we can, you know, certainly emphasize this further as needed, but you'll see the last sentence of this kind of introduction to that criteria says that the rating an evaluation of these criteria will be at the sole discretion and determination of the WRA. And I think
Yeah.
one of the reasons why that's why we don't get into like, you know, a weighting system, right? So that it's not like, to your point, if somebody's, you know, highly advantageous, but like off the charts, highly advantageous in a particular category, that could overcome maybe some of the weaker sections, if you will. So it doesn't say that like you have to be highly advantageous in each category, or that property reuse is, you know, more important than any of the others. So it kind of gives us that level of flexibility. But I think this kind of lets people have a base expectation of like what's going to be important to the board as they make this decision, so that they can, you know, effectively make sure that they're addressing those things that are going to be important to us. So under property reuse, and so again, this is, as the chair mentioned, trying to be as open as possible, kind of some general language that the proposal would clearly demonstrate a viable use of the Grand Hall and the other leasable space that complements existing uses in the building. Obviously, this isn't a standalone building. It is in the context of, you know, other operations, other activities within Union Station, and a proposal that, this is where I think we wanted to be clear about, we're hoping to see a certain level of utilization and activity of the Grand Hall. And I know some of the board members are more recent, but when we did the lease renewal, the 3-year lease renewal with Luciano's back in 2023, we were concerned in our observation. And yes, there was the impacts of the pandemic, but by 2023, we had kind of gotten out of the pandemic, and we were not sure if it was being utilized to its full potential. And they had shared with us some average utilization of like the amount of events that they were having monthly through their recent kind of year. And so my assessment is that Luciano's has been doing about like, you know, anywhere from 70 to 90 events a year. And those can range greatly in terms of the attendance. Like, so in that list of like the 70 to 90 that they shared with us, some of them were smaller, like, you know, 50 people, but some of them were, you know, 400 people. So it ranged variously based on the type of event, but that was like the frequency of the events. So that's how we kind of came up with this, you know, goal of a great proposal would be showing a projection of being able to get at least 100 events done in the Grand Hall annually. So obviously there's 52 weeks in a year. That would be on average, you know, 2 a week. And then as you tier it down, it just kind of looks at, you know, fewer events than that. And then sort of like, you know, this will be up to us, the kind of qualitative review of like, is it viable? Does it feel viable? Or is it maybe not, doesn't feel that viable? The next one being the experience. So is this somebody that, you know, thinks the facility is great and it would be, you know, nice for them to get into the space for the first time of hosting events and managing events? Or is this somebody that has at least 5 years of experience either owning or managing a banquet or event venue? So that's kind of what we speak to. And again, maybe this is something that as we, you know, just discuss it further or are imaginative about the space, maybe we tailor this language a little bit. Obviously, it's geared specifically to like the traditional events that we know have happened at the Grand Hall, as it describes it as like, you know, banquet and conference facility. So maybe that language gets massaged a little bit. But, you know, the idea here being like, does this proposer and bidder have experience doing this, or are they kind of a startup?
Yep.
The financial plan. So looking at, you know, if they give us some details around what they expect to invest in the space to renovate the space, revenues, all of that. We can kind of take a look at that. Obviously, we don't have, I mean, they could certainly provide past financials if we need them, if they have experience, or could speak to how they built that financial pro forma based on their past experience. But I think certain things, you know, just based on our professional staff, you know, could jump off the page of like, you know, if you're going to say that you're going to come in and renovate Luciano's for 50 grand, we're going to know that like, that's not realistic. Right. So that's the ability to make sure that it kind of passes the litmus test, if you will, on the finances. And then the term itself. So obviously we want to have some staying power, some longevity of the space. So making sure it's not fly by night. So we would be interested in seeing a commitment of at least 5 years, which anybody that's submitting something for a lease of less than 5 years would be definitely questionable in terms of if they need to make that investment in Luciano's, but are, you know, not interested in committing to more than 5 years, or at least 5 years would be certainly questionable. So those are the kind of details. I mean, that this is totally up to us. Like, we could have 10 criteria, we could have 2 criteria, we could have, you know, we put together 4 criteria. These were the ones that felt, you know,
Yeah.
that we will take these things into account, because again, we do want to level set expectations for proposers of like, how will the WRA make a selection or evaluate these? What should we be aware of? What should we be communicating in our proposal? So these felt like, you know, 4 very core things that we would certainly take into account. But if there are, you know, if we're
Let's
forgetting
open it.
about something or whatnot, we're not limited to only doing 4. So
So let's open it for discussion. Comments, suggestions, reactions?
Yes, question. With the criteria, I'm not sure if I heard it or it was stated, but with the criteria that we listed, is there a point system assigned to each criteria? Because how will we grade the criterias?
yeah, that speaks to, so we haven't done that in terms of like putting points on it. I think it speaks to the chair's comment about just kind of maximum flexibility and discretion of the board, because then if you start to assign points and then we go through the evaluation again, maybe, you know, we love somebody's idea, maybe they need a little help or maybe a little coaching from somebody on the financial pro forma. But if we start to like, you know, assign points to that, now we could really want to select somebody that was 2 points lower than the other one, but we just feel and we know, you know, based on the other aspects, that one that, you know, was 2 points lower is the right fit for us. We just don't want to like create an environment where now the whole process could be called into question because we've awarded it to the not the highest point scorer, if you will, you know.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I also agree with that. It gives us a heck of a lot more flexibility. If I make a few comments and or questions regarding this whole process, so I think it's great that the fact that through the WRA we don't need to adhere to Chapter 30B requirements. It certainly gives us a lot more flexibility, and also gives us more flexibility in terms of when we're having that session, because we don't have to adhere to any specific timelines for advertising requirements. So we should all keep that in mind. More flexibility when it comes to having that session with the public, and when this thing is going to be released, when we can request the bids to be submitted, that kind of stuff. As far as the criteria, I have a few questions. The first one is access agreement. Peter, you mentioned that there's an access agreement that the winning bidder is going to sign. What level of commitment is this bidder gonna have? How can we hold them accountable if they start walking the property and they decide to walk away? Are we going to ask them for a deposit? Is it going to be non-refundable? What recourse do we have to make sure that they see through it and actually lease the space?
So Peter and I talked about this, Jackson, just a few minutes before the meeting, and I think we concluded that we should have a bid deposit, because we don't want to get into discussions with a successful bidder, you know, and find ourselves at the end of May and then the bidder withdrawing. Peter, you agreed that we're going to consider a bid deposit, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely valid. And so I think we would call out, because I'm trying to compare it to, we've typically done deposits when we do the sale of land. So that comes when they sign like that terms of conveyance or purchase and sale agreement. So I do think we would, within the access agreement, like they should submit their deposit with the bid proposal.
Yep.
So we would add a section with the price proposal that they've included like that deposit at security. And we can talk a little bit about what that amount should be. But then we would, I think, memorialize the terms of whether it's refunded, under what conditions could it be refunded in the access agreement. So we could make that adjustment. I think that's a good point.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also have a couple more recommendations or comments. I know that we're asking for a minimum bid of $11,000, but I don't see any incentives for the proposer or the bidder to offer more than that. Perhaps we should consider doing under a comparative evaluation criteria, perhaps adding another section in there where if you provide more than 11,000, maybe up to 15,000, and I'm not trying to sound greedy here, but give them some kind of an incentive. If you provide more money, then in that particular section, you will be qualified as highly advantageous. If you provide the minimum, then you're not advantageous at all. And if you provide between 11,000 to, let's say, 13,000 a month, then you will be an advantageous candidate. We should explore something like that. And the other question, also under the comparative evaluation criteria, is perhaps adding another section for timing. I didn't see any reference to timing. How soon can you operate? How soon can you begin operate? I realize that they're going to be signing a lease, of course, but what's our timing for that? How soon do they need to sign this lease, and how soon can they become operational?
Yep.
And that should have some weight in the evaluation criteria that we do here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Good points. Thank you.
The one thing I'll say on, so definitely, and this actually speaks to, I should have thought about it when I was answering Walter's question about the criteria and then like, you know, waiting or boxing ourselves in. Definitely price is one of those things that we take into consideration and evaluate. Let me think about, to your point on, you know, I guess maybe emphasizing that further. I know in past, at least in terms of 30B, you wouldn't have price in the comparative evaluation. But so let me think about if we were to do that, where it lives in the document and how to do that. And I think for sure, like, it would be great because obviously we do still, even though we have a lot of federal funds that help us with the operation costs of Union Station. Certainly, the more revenues we get, the less taxpayer dollars are subsidizing the operations of the facility. But I just know that the board in the past has also said that, you know, we don't necessarily want to be overly emphasizing price. So I just want to make sure that we find that sweet spot if we wanted to make sure that we don't get, you know, 5 bids at $11,000 to like kind of indicate, you know, that some folks might, you know, they should be looking at price as one of the things that we'll be taking into account in the evaluation, but what's the right sweet spot? So that I was reflecting on past board conversations about not getting too obsessed with the price.
Right, but it should be clear that the 11,000 is a minimum bid,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
It's a minimum requirement. And I think Jackson's comment is useful to keep in mind. So figure it out, Peter.
Yeah.
It's obviously we don't want to leave any money on the table.
Right.
Anything else, Jackson?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So we'll leave this conversation at this. We don't need any formal vote or anything of that nature. Peter and his staff will be working on establishing listening session. Sherry's going to be the representative of the authority in terms of working with him, and any of you who have any questions or comments, share them with Sherry. Sherry would be useful if you from time to time can, you know, email the rest of us as to what's going on. And I think we're on the way here. So this is an exciting opportunity.
Happy to do that.
Good. Thank you very much. All right. Anything else on this subject? All right. And we have some reports. Peter, we're in your hands.
So on Union Station, you just made me think of something, the discussion about the flexibility we have on the lease and 30B and all of that, that I think it makes sense to make sure the board is aware of this. And we're still kind of looking into some of the details of this internally. But as you all know, the WRA got involved with Union Station and the properties around it in Washington Square, what we've been working on with the hotel that has been completed and the next hotel that hopefully gets under construction this year. That's all part of the Union Station Urban Renewal Plan, which has a 30-year term, and it was adopted in 1996. So 2026 is when that 30-year term comes up. And that is what gives us this flexibility, right? So like, even if it were to expire, if we didn't want to, you know, attempt to renew the urban renewal plan, my understanding is that we can still own Union Station, but that flexibility starts to go away in terms of procurements of things like particularly real estate. And so I just think it should be on our agenda this year once we kind of look at things internally and get some more specifics, like what's next? Do we, because if you look back at the 1996 urban renewal plan, and this is, I guess, a testament to 30 years of hard work, a lot of what that plan speaks to has been accomplished at this point. So to just like, oh, let's just submit a renewal to the state and get another 30 years or whatnot, I think is not enough or appropriate. Like, I think we would have to go through, my instinct, this is what kind of what we're looking into as well, is that we might need to either do a new one or do a substantial update to justify that renewal. Because if we were to just kind of take what was then and then like extend it, they're gonna be like, well, what are you doing? Why are you extending this? Because a lot of what that plan speaks to has been accomplished. So why do you need another 30 years? So that's something to just, I wanted to put it out there because all the dates were starting to align in my head, and we were talking about the flexibility of the procurement, which is relevant as it relates to what the benefits are of having an active urban renewal plan.
Good.
So
What
does
was the
that,
expiration date?
It's in 2026. I'd have to look at the date. I think it's
Okay.
probably towards the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
and that's like a state approval process?
Yes,
Peter?
yeah.
Okay.
And creating one takes a lot of time. So, you
Yeah.
know, our most recent one being the downtown urban revitalization plan with
right.
the ballpark and the Den Home and the associated properties. And Jackson actually worked on this at the time when he worked for the city. You know, that probably took 2.5, 3 years to create. There's a lot of statutory requirements around community engagement, public hearings. There's obviously a lot of consulting and planning that goes into it. Now, we're not starting from scratch. You know, if we were to
Right.
do a renewal, if we were to consider a renewal, you know, I don't think that we would have to, it wouldn't take 2 to 3 years and all of that, but I could just flag it to say that it's not just like submit a letter to the state and stamp the renewal. Because, you know, when you look at something that was created in 1996, a lot of the, you know, what it speaks to is either obsolete or has been accomplished. So we would need to do some more about like, well, then what is the purpose for the renewal, and what do we need to do next in this area? And there isn't really a lot, you know, as we finish that sale of that last development parcel at Washington Square now to the hotel,
Yeah.
there isn't much. I mean, we've always, you know, long desired, as we know, the retail space at the Union Station garage. But there's really not a whole lot else. So,
Can we see that agreement?
yeah, I can share it. The original
Okay,
urban renewal plan.
that'd be
Yeah,
helpful.
sure.
That'd be
Yeah,
great.
Sure.
And perhaps at our next meeting, by the next meeting, you can give us the date, well, no, the expiration date from seeing the document, but we should keep this item on our agenda, I think, for each meeting.
Yep.
So that it's in front of us and not behind us.
Yep.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up, Peter. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's it for Union Station. No real updates on the MBTA working group from last month. We do have a meeting coming up in it's either, I think it's in February, with the local Worcester group. And I think they're working on trying to create that deliverable that they've talked about as like a blueprint for keeping the pressure on the state and the eye on the state on various things that need to happen at the state level, as we know, with signalization and you know, other things to get us to where we want to be with commuter rail. So I don't have a specific you know, update this month compared to last month, unless there's any questions on that.
Yeah, let me just say, I've spoken with Richard Burke, who chairs this group. It's, I think, unfortunately, but increasingly clear that the state has no commitment to do anything but add some additional trains, and no commitment at all to increase the speed of transport between Worcester and Boston. There appears to be more interest in adding stops in the Boston suburban communities, which slows the time of travel, and more attention to that than anything else. So this is a separate subject than what we ordinarily do as part of our business, but we need as a community to think about how do we get this done? How do we get high-speed rail service between Worcester and Boston? And how do we make it clear that anything less than that is not acceptable?
Right.
I don't have an answer to it, but um, it's very much in Richard's mind, and he and I have talked about some alternatives, and he's going to explore those. So I'll report further. But you're right, Peter. There isn't much new news there,
Right.
and you might also it could be irrelevant, but some of you may have heard all the news reports about the massive investment which the state is making in the Foxborough area to accommodate the World Cup activities at the Kraft properties in Foxborough. It's an enormous amount of money being devoted to improving service to Foxborough and improving the station in Foxborough. And it's a reminder that we are not in a high priority to the state in terms of transportation, and other places are, but that's just it's only sour grapes you're hearing from me. All right, how about the Denholm building, Peter?
Yes, so what we are doing now, as I mentioned at the last board meeting, we have Amendment 1 executed with the Mankiti Group. That brings their due diligence period through this March. So then they would have to, that's at the following that is when they would have to start paying that non-refundable deposit. So we would expect to hear from them if there's any concerns about that commitment staying and then getting that non-refundable deposit as they continue forward. One of the things that we have been exploring is as it relates to, if you remember their presentation about the economics and some of the need for them to do additional due diligence and some of the reliance that they mentioned on various subsidy programs to close the financial gap. The big number and the basis for their one of the basis for their request for that amendment is this abatement and demolition cost. So they had estimated at 7 million. We're trying to get additional information and work done to refine that kind of scope and estimate as well. And we're trying to think through, the programs that are out there for abatement and demolition, some of which are much more advantageous to municipalities and public entities like the Worcester Redevelopment Authority. I mentioned before that we did receive or have been awarded a $500,000 site readiness grant from Mass Development through the Redevelopment Authority. So we're trying to best figure out how to utilize that, probably more on the wouldn't go towards, I don't think, cost of actual abatement and demolition. It would be with some of the design work, scoping, consulting and stuff like that to get us to a level where we would actually have like a bid package for the project on abatement and demo. And so all of that to say that I think as we move forward, the best way to unlock the progress of this project and get the abatement and demolition going, I think we might need to consider as a board if it makes sense for the WRA to lead that. Obviously, if we do that, it would materially affect the land disposition and development agreement. We would have to consider an amendment if we were to go that direction, because if you remember and some of you actually maybe weren't on the board at the time, but the way that we had structured that procurement for the Denholm redevelopment was if the developer was committing to taking on the abatement and demo, we offered a credit on the minimum bid price. So the minimum bid price was $3 million. And if they were going to take on the abatement and demo, we offered a $2.5 million credit. Now that wasn't necessarily because we had confidence that it was only going to be $2.5 million to take it down. I think we wanted to make sure that we were still getting some land sale proceeds out of this, but giving a meaningful credit for it. We didn't expect that it was going to be, $7 million. And I think hopefully it'll be somewhere in between that range. I think the Mankiti Group has some, preliminary information to come up with that $7 million. But as they described to really get a scope of work and get that refined as you go out to bidding, like doing some more invasive investigation to really confirm some of the assumptions around hazardous building materials is necessary. But all that to say that, like, if we were to, consider taking on abatement and demolition, then we would, obviously no longer be offering that credit. So we would be getting at least $3 million in the sale price if we were to go that direction. But I just wanted to raise it to the board in terms of just what we've been trying to work on with Menkidi Group, because I think they've been at the table. I have a weekly call with them. They've been, I think, still there, committed, trying to strategize and solve for the abatement and demolition. But as they were, talking about different programs and things like that, there's an EPA brownfields program, there's a mass development brownfields program. And when you look at those programs, they're far more advantageous to municipalities and public entities. In many cases, like, you could have a public entity like the Redevelopment Authority of the city be eligible for a grant that does not need to be repaid, versus like what they offer to private developers are loans. And so while it's a source of capital, it doesn't necessarily help in us trying to tackle this subsidy need and the economics of the project if it's just more loans. So that's just, I guess, to report back of like what those conversations have looked like, what that strategy is or discussions have looked like on tackling the abatement and demo, so that we de-risk the project, show that progress, get it more pad ready. And it's just kind of like leaning me towards the direction of like, this might make more sense and we could be more successful with securing subsidy if the WRA is the lead applicant on those types of program applications. So
Good.
And how long do those take, Peter? I just feel like it's just been like really slow in this. And I understand that rationale, but I just feel, I don't know, it just feels really slow.
Yeah. There's usually annual or biannual type of application. Some are rolling, some are, cycles, if you will. We have been in touch with Mass Development and asked if, something like this could be eligible for an application like outside of like an annual type of state programmatic function. We're still working through that discussion right now. It has to do with like, who's the applicant, what's the scope, what are you doing? And that could lead you into one bucket of funds or another. But we're, trying to come up with those ways that are as expeditiously as possible and like securing those resources. And I think we could share more about that strategy at an upcoming board meeting, because I think we would want to, before submitting, specific applications and all of that, make sure that the board is in agreement with those applications and going in that direction and how it could impact our existing land disposition agreement with the Menkidi Group. But, I'd say that if we decided to go in that direction and we were successful with some of our state and federal partners, I think we could, have a goal of getting like contractor on board to do demolition by like the end of 2026. It's a little aggressive, but that's, and obviously the demolition itself would probably take, several months, to actually execute upon. But it's to say that some of those programs at the state and federal level, it's not like, see you in 2028. It's like every year they're accepting applications and stuff at various points throughout the year. So we've started we haven't submitted any applications because I would tell the board if we were to actually formalize an application. But we've been having those conversations with our state and federal partners that like, this is a priority. We need to get this building down. We need to get progress. It's obviously from our perspective too, whether or not things, continue to go well with the Menkidi Group and solving, executing on their proposal. If we get the building down, like we no longer have carrying costs associated, far minimal carrying costs than we do today. So it's in our interest too, as we just look at, effectively the liability that is on our books to just, start to work on those scenarios.
So I guess I just have two comments. So I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do to sort of prepare for that outcome without having people do work that's a waste of time. And it sounds like you've been having those conversations, so that makes sense. And then, I know Menkidi has another project that they're doing on Main Street. They're talking about doing the Shacks building now into residential. So I just feel like they have a lot going on. I just want to make sure that this continues to be a priority for them. And if, you said you're having meetings with them, frequent meetings with them weekly, which makes sense. I guess I'm just nervous.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone else has the same.
No.
Well, that was, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you, Walter, please.
No, I was going to say, I agree with Sherry that are you getting a sense from Menkidi Group that they're committed to this project? Provided that we were to walk this path with them relative to the abatement. Are they committed moving forward? As Sherry said, they do have a lot on their table.
Yeah, I would say my sense is that they're committed. However, it's just, I think they're struggling with solving for the issues that they had presented to us when we undertook the First Amendment. You know, and certainly committed to working with us to strategize how to, like, again, get at least the abatement and demo going, de-risk the project and all of that. But as we've just been trying to strategize that and looking at, you know, I think for them, it's for them to try to identify a source of capital, whether it's taking on debt or, you know, their own money to take down, spend $7 million to take it down without kind of a clear line of sight on like the financing of the end product. I think that that's a reasonable business concern, right? So I think it's just trying to yeah, figure that out essentially. So, but I don't think it's like, you know, they do have other things going on in Worcester for sure. But I don't think it's resulted in a lack of commitment. And I think the attention, obviously with these weekly calls, I think the attention's there, but it's kind of like, how do we solve for it? You know what I mean? It's like, it's more of like just identifying the solution and executing on the solution that I think is causing, you know, this delay, if you will. And as, you know, we have looked at different solutions, it's like pointing towards like, well, this isn't like a Mankiti Group solution. It's more of like a WRA solution, working with our state and federal partners. And because obviously they don't own the land, right? So even if they would like spend their own money or get a loan or do something to do the abatement and demolition, they would have to like consummate the transaction and take on, you're not going to spend $7 million on a property that you don't own, right? And for them to like take ownership and finance the acquisition as well. And with the banks, obviously the banks and anybody involved, they're going to say, well, what's the clear line of sight that like when you're going to get a shovel in the ground to do the new construction? So it's like, it's hard to sequence all of that stuff, or to like really get the progress going on some of that early stuff that we would love to see as well before like the complete package is all put together. So I think that's why it's kind of leaning more towards, do we kind of like bifurcate or two-step it, where it's like, could we tackle getting the site, you know, pad ready, abatement and demolition, and then maybe it's, I mean, I don't want to, I guess, jump to conclusions or go too far ahead, but you know, I think if the Mankiti Group continues to be at the table making those monthly non-refundable deposits, I think all that's earnest interest, earnest commitment and all of that. But once we have a pad ready site, if there was something that like were to not be going well with the Mankiti Group at that time, or lack of progress or what have you with the terms and conditions that we have in our contract right now, like we could put it back out to bid. Right. And I think it would be far more attractive, as we know, if there's, you know, a plan in place to make it more pad ready and be a clean piece of land essentially to work with if we were to put it back out to bid in the future. But that's why I think we're trying to like figure out how to get that done, because all that stuff and the timing of all that, we want to show progress. We want to get, you know, some of this liability off of our books, because if it's just the land, you know, we would have far fewer, if any, expenses, you know, as a board.
Right.
Seems to me that our path is clear. Remember that Mankiti was not the only bidder on this, and while we want to do something with them, they are not the only game that's possible, right? And I think Peter said it well. We need to get the damn building down for a lot of reasons. One is it gives us more opportunity in terms of getting something built. Second, it's the longer that building is there, it is a reminder to the community that we aren't making progress. It's been more than a year that all the tenants left, right?
Yeah.
And point Sherry's made before. So it seems to me that we need to move as firmly, as quickly, as effectively as possible to get the building down. That gives us more options with Mankiti. It gives us more options if Mankiti is not interested, and they've been a good partner so far, but if they aren't, we can move on. I think that's where we have to point ourselves.
I mean, do we have to wait until March? Like, could we go to them and say, look, we're going to take it down? Like,
well, we don't have we don't have the funds to take it down. Go ahead.
Yeah, we could go in that direct, and I think that they're I guess on board in evaluating again these programs and resources and things like that.
Right.
And my observations, they're in agreement with that. The thing that happens in March is that like following that is when they need to make a decision. Are they going to start paying us $7,500 a month non-refundable deposit? That's going to be a decision for them to make. And then the other piece is just like, as we I guess, make a decision to go this direction of like WRA is going to start making applications to the state and
right.
federal government to get resources, basically like, assume that work for abatement and demo, we will have to just revisit the land disposition agreement to
Right.
make sure that they're no longer getting, at a minimum, no longer getting a $2.5 million credit, but there could be
Right.
some other terms and conditions that we need to think about, and as well as just timeline, right? Because if they are, paying the $7,500 a month, that's great. That's a good commitment. But just one of the things, and they haven't said this to me yet, but one of the things that I anticipate is like they'll have no control over our schedule, right? So like if
Yeah.
we were to assemble the resources, do abatement and demolition, now that $7,500 a month could be for an indefinite amount of time, right? Because now we're driving the schedule,
Right.
they're not driving the
Right.
schedule. So just some of those like details of
Yep.
the LDA, we would have to just like
Yep.
think through as
Yep.
part of like a potential amendment too. And that's only, if they are making the payments and all of that versus, just basically letting Amendment 1 expire and then going back out to
Okay.
bid at some point.
So it sounds like we should start making the application then.
Yeah. So there's certain timing of things. We're right now just getting that feedback from those program managers and kind of strategizing, so I can share, as we move forward, what we're thinking and map it out for the board of like, these are the different things at the state and federal level. These are some of the, eligibility kind of parameters, how we're thinking about putting together, because no one program is going to get us to $6 million. It's going to be stitching together probably like 4 or 5 sources to get to $6 or $7 million. So we could map that out for the board as we finalize that strategy.
Does this
Peter,
level,
are there any potential repercussions with the other bidders? Because I'm hearing that Menkiti may not be able to do this, at least the demolition and the abatement, because it's going to cost way too much. And we can do it, well, the WRA could potentially do it itself because of our nonprofit status, we could get the grants. But would this present any repercussions with other bidders? Menkiti won the RFP. They were the selected proposer or the selected bidder precisely because they said they were going to do X, Y, and Z. Now everybody's finding out that they cannot do X. They want us to do X. They want the WRA to do X. Any potential repercussions regarding that?
My instinct. Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Peter,
My
please.
instinct was going to be no, but I think I'll further investigate that to confirm that instinct and that assumption. But that's my instinct, is that there wouldn't be. There was only one other at that time.
There's there's only one other bid. The bid was not accepted. I don't think I agree with Peter, but it's a good question to ask, Jackson.
Yeah.
Good
Okay.
question to ask.
Okay, and I agree. In that case, then we should definitely, at the very least, start submitting applications. In the event, that way we're not wasting any time. We're showing
Yeah.
progress. In the event that this thing doesn't happen with the Menkiti group, we already have a plan B in place to demolish the building, to do the abatement, and
Yep.
having a pad ready site is a heck of a lot easier to bed it out again.
Yep. Okay. Anything further on this?
yeah, I got a question. Does this project have a PLA?
Does the Denholm project have a project labor agreement? No, it doesn't.
No.
It has what we would. So the Worcester Redevelopment authority has the responsible employer and inclusionary participation policy, which is analogous to the city's responsible employer ordinance and responsible development ordinance. The responsible development ordinance that the city has is a little more granular and specific than the REIPP of the WRA. If the Menkiti group, and I know that there's been some talk as this Shacks thing has been playing out, that I think folks know that the Menkiti group has expressed, that the Denholm building would have a reliance on subsidies. And if they were to make an application for any kind of like tax benefit from the city, then the responsible development ordinance would be incorporated by contract. So it's not a, project labor agreement is like kind of at a different kind of level, if you will. And there's obviously a lot of criteria for which that needs to satisfy before anybody could consider a project labor agreement. But I would say that a lot of what I think project labor agreements attempt to accomplish as it relates to, making sure that contractors are in good standing, paying appropriate wages, all of that are things, and I can share it with you, the details of our responsible development ordinance as a city.
Yes.
Yep. Good question.
Okay. All right.
I
we'll
know
move
we're a
on to-
little over time, but I did want to just mention on the RMV property. So since our last meeting, we closed on that with DOT. So the WRA owns 611 Main Street now. We talked about as part of the demonstration project plan, we will be doing a community session on that. I think the urgency, is on the Luciano space in the Grand Hall, but we're concurrently working on planning for that community session on the RMV property. One of the other things that, because it could come quickly, I'm just thinking of March and April here, is I think as a WRA might want to work with the city of Worcester on potentially making use of that parking lot, in the interim, as we now own the property, and just look at, how best to be productive with that property as we kind of go through this whole process. I just think of the fact that the South District Fire Station is getting underway at 25 Madison Street, that the city purchased that from the state. That was the accessory lot of the RMV. And we had been using that for surface parking, in particular for events at Polar Park for the last 2 or 3 years. And then I think about the contractors too, as we move forward with that project for the South District Fire Station. There's going to be a lot of contractor employees. So I just think that the WRA might want to have that willingness and open kind of partnership with the municipality to make that parking lot available to, whether it's users of Polar Park, the contractor employees that'll be building the South District Fire Station. So we can talk further as we go over the next couple months about what that looks like and the details of that. But just knowing that spring is around the corner, in particular with Polar Park, it might be helpful to put those parking spaces into play.
Good.
Peter,
Okay,
has there been any conversations about with the Worcester Public Schools? I know there's overcrowding at Chandler Elementary, and they with the faculty parking with space. I know they had the kindergarten over at the YMCA, and so I'm just wondering if that's an opportunity at all,
For like parking at the RMV.
or you're just using the RMV for that for the school
Oh,
and parking.
yeah. I could reach out to them certainly in the interim about parking. I know it's a little distant to walk all the way to Chandler Elementary. I did
Yeah.
hear that, and we are the manager in particular, and sometimes I participate in as it relates to like development patterns and how that could impact school enrollment in different districts and all of that. And I know the manager is in frequent conversation with the superintendent about facility needs and all of that. And Jim Bedard on our team knows about some of those needs with their facilities department at the schools. I believe that they have said in certain settings that they're trying to figure out what's the highest and best use of the Fanning building too, the girls' trades. And I think
Okay.
some of the context for that is Chandler Elementary as well.
Okay.
I just don't know. I'm trying to think about I wouldn't want to do a bait and switch on the DOT in terms of how we approach them about, what
Right.
we want to accomplish with the RMV to then have it be a municipal use. I'm not to say
Right.
that a municipal use wouldn't have maybe certain benefits or merits. I just wouldn't want it to
Right.
be inconsistent with how we communicated our engagement with the DOT on acquiring this for redevelopment purposes. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
all right. Madison, is there anything you'd like to report regarding Madison, Peter?
So I included as an addendum to the minutes, the letters that we had gotten from them last month. One of the key updates was the second residential site, which is not being pursued by Madison anymore. He has a purchase and sale agreement with GFI Partners. They did achieve site plan approval from the planning board on January 7th, which was great. And that shows kind of the speed. I think I look at some of these municipalities across the Commonwealth that are struggling with housing, but still bogging down the development review process with planning board and zoning board in some of these areas. When you look at, how I think the capacity of our staff to keep up in the board and how frequently they meet and all of that. I mean, I think they submitted their application in early December. So you're talking about less than 30 days to get, the entitlement to build the 197 units there. So that would be great, as we know, to see that piece, get underway. That I think they're hoping to get. We talked a little bit about the last board meeting. I think they were saying summer might be a little aggressive, but having that planning board step out of the way, now they can really get into building permit and, wrapping up their financing strategy and all of that. So hopefully that continues to move along with good momentum.
Okay. So you've all received the financial update reports, which is informational. I don't believe a vote is required, but if any of you have any questions about any of those items, we're here to take them. I can't answer them, but Peter can.
Nothing out of the ordinary this month, and we should have, I think, we're doing this single audit soon, so we should have an audit presentation for the board in like maybe March, April timeframe.
Good. Is there any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And second, all right, we need a roll call vote.
Yes, Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Mr. Restrepo,
Yes.
Mr. Pepper,
Yes.
Ms. Pitcher,
Yes.
and Chair Angelini.
Yes, and thanks all of you. This is a good meeting, good discussions. Thanks very much. Have a great
Thank you all.
day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, Peter.